It might be hard to believe, but even before TikTok was telling everyone to read the same 5 books, there were still certain stories everyone seemed to know and pick up, and a lot of them are still really popular today. Or mentioning the title of one of these books will unlock intense flashbacks to middle school and Tumblr posts that had been locked away in a dusty brain file. I've been having a lot of these flashbacks lately, and it's made me wonder what kind of books are the authors of popular series past writing now? Have they adapted the tropes and themes of their stories to match what's popular in the present day zeitgeist, or are they stuck in a paranormal dystopian obsessed era that people have moved on from? The only way to find out is to read what these authors are writing now, so this week I'm going to revisit the ghosts of tween past to find out what happened to these YA authors. I heard from a little birdie, aka TikTok, that Barnes & Noble is having a huge sale right now, and I think today's the last day, so we're headed over to the local B&N to see if we can find any of these authors' more recent releases. Let's go! So much has happened since that last little reading montage. I went to New York for the weekend. I smashed my finger in a door. I also posted the Wicked King recap and freaked out about the Wicked King recap. I also finished our very first book in this experiment by any other name written by Lauren Kate. And if you don't recognize the name Lauren Kate, you might remember her critically acclaimed paranormal romance that was then adapted into a tragically misunderstood movie.
There's one more thing I'm a little embarrassed to even ask, but...
Well, then don't.
With an actor that went on to be in Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, okay? You could say it's a story that we all fell for. That's right. This cartoon cover adult romance novel was written by the same woman that lovingly traumatized us with Fallen. Oh my god. I was a Fallen Angel girl, okay? And spoiler alert for this book, but the reincarnation plot actually changed the anatomical makeup of my body. Like, the reincarnation stories that I wrote that were inspired by this book should be studied by mental health professionals. It was bad. But we need to talk about this sweet little romance book. I really liked it. This one is for the reader girlies that love to read about reader girlies because it's about a main character who is a book editor and she needs to convince this like huge mega ultra romance author to submit her next manuscript so that our main character doesn't lose her job. I really liked the internal struggle that the main character has because she starts out this book in a relationship that she's convinced herself is right for her, and I feel like that's so realistic. Like, I know a bunch of people that have been in relationships like that, and so getting to see her go through that but knowing she's gonna end up in a more positive place, it's vindicating, it's comforting, it's good. I will say, something to think about, there are a few millennial moments in this book. Let me give you an example. And your overalls are straight fire, Roof. But there are also some bangers, okay? Hold on. He stares at me as if we've never met before, which is what it feels like to break up with the person you thought you'd love forever. Damn! For me, it's like, you can have some crazy overalls if we're also gonna get some hard hitters like that, you know? And for those that are curious, I would say this is a 0 on the Scoville scale, which is a-okay with me because it's got tension, drama, yearning, banter, chemistry, and that is the #1 priority for me when it comes to a romance novel. I will say it is super short, so you don't get a ton of depth. So really my biggest complaint is that there isn't more. Like, I would have read so much more of this. It was really fun. And I think it's really exciting that Lauren Kate has jumped into the adult romance world. Obviously this book is super different than Fallen, but I think Miss Lauren Kate has found her new niche. I loved it. Probably 3.5 stars for me. The next book in this experiment I am both excited and nervous about because we are getting into The Maze Cutter by James Dashner, which is the same author of the mega popular hit series The Maze Runner. And I still remember little tween Paige sitting in the kitchen of my childhood home reading The Maze Runner and getting to the really sad thing that happens at the end of book 1 and just starting to sob uncontrollably and sobbing through the entire end of the book until I finished and got up and like sad shuffled into the living room where one of my brothers was sitting, and he looked up, took one look at my nasty snot covered face and said, "Just finished The Maze Runner?" So yeah, I'm a Maze Runner girly and also a Teen Wolf girly. I was sitting there every week in high school watching the live new episodes come out, and those things may seem unrelated, but they're not, because they have one thing in common, and that is Dylan O'Brien, aka Styles, aka Thomas, and the king of the internet boyfriends. But right now, that's besides the point, because James Dashner has a new series that he's kind of in the middle of that takes place in the Maze Runner world 73 years later. I'm really interested in checking this out. It was kind of the reason that I thought of the idea for this video in the first place, because I was so surprised that there was a new Maze Runner series, and I feel like it could go either way. It could add a whole bunch of depth and new life into this world that so many people are already obsessed with, or it could maybe just feel like it's dragging it along after the success of the original trilogy, which I've definitely seen happen before with other series. And as a fangirl, it's so sad, because when you're obsessed with a world and there's new content coming out about it, you are so excited and you want to support it if it's impactful and meaningful. So yeah, excited but nervous. I'm around the 100-page mark in this story, and right away it was obviously one of those books where it's gonna take at least 100 pages for you to have any idea what's going on. I'm a little confused at the moment. I think it's a combination of having a blurry memory about what happened in the original series, following these 3 vastly different perspectives in this book, and also the world feeling really, really different than where we left it in The Maze Runner. But it has this really confusing blend of feeling like you need to know exactly what happened in the original trilogy to know what's going on, while everything also feels so different. Especially because the people in this story misunderstood something about one of the characters in The Maze Runner, and it had me so confused about whether or not I was misremembering what happened. So I think that I'm just starting to figure out what's going on here, and I'm hoping that it all comes together in the end. I was having a bit of a hard time locking in, so I wanted to go for a walk and listen to the audiobook, but we are having an insane heat wave right now. It is so hot outside, so I just kind of had to brute force my way through it, and then I got up early enough today to go for a walk and listen to the audiobook, which ended up working out nicely because I finished the book, and now I can actually tell you what the book is about, which is basically the political landscape of Alaska 73 years after The Maze Runner. And it's this really pivotal time because there's a looming question of what the future is gonna look like, because change is coming. Now that I've finished, let me say off the top that I am biased. But you know how there are books that you read and you're just like, oh my god, this book was actually written for me specifically? Unfortunately, I think that this book was kind of the opposite of that. I do not think that I am the target audience for this book at all. Even as a Maze Runner fan, it felt like the audience was really specific to teens, which it is a young adult novel, so that makes sense, but often with a continuation like this, it'll sometimes be written with the audience that was a teenager when they read the first trilogy in mind, and this didn't really seem to be doing that, which is fine, but it just means that I'm not the audience. Also, at this point, I just know more about the writing styles and voices and themes that I prefer when I'm reading, and this kind of straightforward, minimalist style just isn't really for me anymore. I don't feel like I can outright say this continuation is just a cash grab, although there are people reviewing on Goodreads that would disagree and just say that. I do think that there's an audience for this book. I just think that it hasn't really given us anything that The Maze Runner hasn't already given us. I would give this book 2 stars. I was not the right audience for it. But that means we can move on to the next book, and when I think about popular series that probably traumatized me as a child, one of the first books that comes to mind is The Uglies by Scott Westerfield, and I don't think I'm alone here. It has over 660,000 ratings on Goodreads, and it's been almost 20 years since this book series came out, and I think over 10 since I read it. I am so old. And apparently they're making an Uglies movie starring Joey King, potentially releasing this year. I don't know. I see the Uglies series a little bit differently now. Like, when I first read them, I mostly remember thinking that the mysterious love interest was sexy and cool, and also that I really wanted a hoverboard. And I think that I kind of completely missed all of the commentary on society's beauty standards and government control, which is like the point of the series. But honestly, I don't even think that the commentary in these books would hold up today. Like, I remember the sequels getting dark. I remember them getting dark. With that being said, similarly to The Maze Runner, this series has a new follow-up that takes place in the same world, and I'm curious to see if I can actually pick up on the commentary now that my brain has fully developed, and also if I'll like the commentary at all. Like, has this series changed its tune? And honestly, I am hoping that they still get to hoverboard. I meant to give you guys an update before I finished reading Imposters, but I genuinely just read the entire thing in one sitting. It went so quickly. Right before I started, I saw that Carrie Can Read just posted a video reading the entire original Uglies series, so I watched that to get a little bit of a refresh, and honestly, I'm so glad because I forgot that the main character's name was Tally, and she's kind of important in this new series, so thank you for making that video for me. This book was such a visceral transportation back to peak teen dystopian reading days. It was honestly a little bit scary. Imposters takes place not that long after the events of The Uglies, and our main character is the daughter of one of the richest families in this society, and they're trying to broker some sort of temporary alliance with another rich family, and so they send their beloved daughter over to get to know the other family's beloved son. But the twist is that our main character is not actually this rich dude's beloved daughter. She's her secret twin. So we have a little bit of an heir and a spare situation going on, and it's safer to send the spare over to the other family that they don't know very well than to send the actual beloved daughter heir. At the same time, there's this rebel faction that hates the industrial complex that these rich families have all created, so they're trying to fight against the man and bring down corporate greed. And they basically worship Tally, the main character from The Uglies, but she's been missing. Like, she's not a part of the book or anything. I honestly really like the premise for this book, especially because I read an interview from the author, and he talked about how the inspiration came about because he wanted to show that a revolution doesn't solve all of the world's problems. Like, not everything is honky-dory, and there's still a whole bunch of great evil that can be done. Kind of like how our society has functioned so far, you know what I'm saying? And dystopians are supposed to be critical of society, like that's the point of the genre. So even though this series is taking place in the same world as The Uglies, it does feel like the beginning of the next step. I also think his writing has improved a lot, but still reading about societal corruption and greed coming from the top kind of made me feel a little bit hopeless in this series. Like, the revolution in the original trilogy wasn't enough. And I know that that reality was the inspiration for the series, so I think that if the Imposters series overall has like a generally happy ending, then it would be worth it. But if it didn't, I would be a little bit mad. I feel like the end of a dystopian should make you want to rally and fight against the man and the cause and society and all of that. And if you just end up once again in a bad place, I feel like it has a bit of the opposite effect. But speaking of being brought back to my teen reading days, it does have some classic cliches. I wouldn't say that this book is is transforming the genre in any means of the term. And it for sure has massive "you're not like other girls" syndrome. And also the voice is very young, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I truly think I would have loved this book if I read it when I was a teen. I think my other main criticism is that it didn't bring a lot to the conversation that the Uglies already started. I kind of can't help but compare every dystopian to The Hunger Games, the queen of dystopians, especially since the prequel that's about Snow and also the one that was just announced both focus on different aspects of, you know, corporate greed and government corruption and criticism of society and all of those things. And so they feel really necessary and important. And I kind of feel like Imposters just tackles the same issues of like corporate greed is bad in general, and, you know, you should have the freedom of choice in general, which we already read about in The Uglies. And also the pacing of the romance plot was like a little bit off for me. But the book did fly by. I really liked the characters. I loved the hoverboards, and the twists were actually surprisingly good. Like, you could feel that twists were coming, but I could not figure out what they were. I was pleasantly surprised. And I think that fans of the Uglies series would genuinely really enjoy this. It's a blast from the past. It's a really quick read, and the inspiration for the series makes a lot of sense. So while I do feel like it sticks to a lot of the classic themes and tropes and the writing voice of a typical 2000s dystopian novel, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing in this case. Okay. Concluding thoughts. I'm really glad that I did this experiment because I've been wondering what some of these authors have been up to for a while now, and I did not expect such a range of development and success. Also, after reading 2 YA dystopian novels in a row and the state of the world right now, I have a conspiracy theory that dystopian novels in some form are going to come back full force in the next few years. I rest my case.